This is an informational video on the lore of Heartstrings, a series that I'm making in Project Arrhythmia. This is about a background character named Anemia, who will appear in the last level of Heartstrings, but for the most part is limited to the background and is almost never seen in cutscenes or the levels, though her history and characterization is vital to some of the characters' histories and their roles in the story. It's still possible to enjoy the story of Heartstrings without watching this, and it's more to enhance and understand the already present lore a bit better. With that said, let's get into it. Long ago, before Anemia became a part of the royal family and she met King Sink, she was instead a simple sage living in the sanctuary in the mountains with her fellow sages. Anemia was a violet square who had a corner missing. She was very kind and soft-spoken, but she had a strong will and determination, and could be considered clever in some cases. Since birth, Anemia was frail and frequently ill. It was rare for her to even go outside, and when she did, she stared in wonder and splendor at the beauty of the whole world. Anemia had a great, beautiful desire, and it was simply to one day leave the sanctuary and live a long, healthy, beautiful life. Being a sage, she was unaffected by the heart's magic and healing powers, despite being exposed to it. It could not heal her. The sages had tried everything in their power, their own magic, medicine, and even isolation and rest. But no matter what, Anemia's health slowly declined over time. She had a very strong will to live. Anemia did not want to die. She was hopelessly desperate. She wanted status, a long life, and to find true love. Once a year, the sages will make a pilgrimage to the main capital of Arrhythmia to be up to date on the status of the heart and to get their news of the outside world. The sages eventually decided that Anemia needed to go see outside of the sanctuary and the rest of Arrhythmia, even if it is just once. Even so, the sages still wore a variety of capes to hide their faces and shroud themselves in darkness, symbolic that they have chosen to not rely on the powers of the heart and therefore walk in darkness. Anemia was overjoyed to go with her fellow sages. On her pilgrimage down the mountain into the capital, she used all of her willpower to seem as healthy as possible, and to an extent, it was somewhat true. Her excitement and passion was just enough to ward off her frailty. Within a few days, Anemia had finally made it to the capital city. She was able to meet with the royal family. Anemia observed the proceedings and news exchanged between her fellow sages and the royals with a fading passion, slowly turning to boredom. It truly was incredible to see the outside world on a mission that didn't involve them desperately taking her to the heart in a fervent bid to try and heal her, but she found it somewhat boring. The sages treated this mission as a chore, rather than a highly vital and important trip. But soon, that boredom melted away when she got to speak to Prince Sink for the first time. He was kind and cracked jokes with her. He didn't treat her like fine china like everyone else around her did. Sink treated Anemia like an equal. And as someone who is surrounded by nothing but pity and treated like a fragile plaything her whole life, she finally felt peace. She felt affection for this prince, and she wanted him. Once Anemia returned home to the monastery, she couldn't stop thinking about him. She wanted to meet him again, but she knew that she may not make it alive to the next year to ever even see him again. Anemia needed something. She needed something dark to ensure a life of happiness. Anemia went to the forbidden sect of the sanctuary to find an ancient and dark book describing old forgotten rituals with dark intent. Rituals that would summon things not of this world that only the mad and desperate would try to commune with. Anemia wasn't sure if she was either mad or desperate. Maybe both to an extent. Anemia performed the dark ritual, and performed a being made purely of shadows. This thing was named Asmodeus, and she was ready to make a pact with him. Anemia told Asmodeus of her plight, her desire to live longer and to be with Sync forever. She pleaded with desperate tears how she longed for love and happiness with the prince. Asmodeus offered her something. He told her that he'd be willing to make Sync fall in love with her, but not without a price. The price would be for Anemia to have Asmodeus' child. Shocked and horrified, she nearly refused it at first, until she realized this was her best and likely only chance. After thinking it through, she reluctantly agreed. It was a dark price, but once Asmodeus disappeared, Anemia was filled with relief. She had done it. Sync would soon fall in love with her, and she would be whisked away to a life away from the boorish sanctuary and to the capital to live happily forever with him. Soon, Sync had arrived at the sanctuary, requesting to see her, and she agreed. The two had began a courtship, and they fell in love. The cruel irony is that after a while, the at first artificial love that Asmodeus had instilled in Sync had soon turned into genuine affection and a caring for Anemia. She was taken to the castle and married to Sync within a few months' time. She was incredibly happy, but there was a darker, pressing matter. Anemia was still horribly ill, and she knew that on this planet she wouldn't have much time left with him. She realized that Asmodeus hadn't upheld her second request of a long life. Anemia was desperate once again. She had to do something. She used the book she had taken from the sanctuary once again, begging Asmodeus to give her a longer life. Asmodeus refused her, saying that it was her own hubris and thirst for love that doomed her to a shortened life. In a fit of rage, she burned the book and left the palace to seek out her own way. Anemia soon met a witch in the forest who called herself Trip, a witch who surrounded herself with dozens of bird and magpie familiars who were acutely powerful with magic, particularly destruction, but also a form of healing. As far as Anemia knew, Trip was one of the most powerful mages in all of Arrhythmia. Trip reasoned with Anemia that she can heal her frailty, but she needs a price. Anemia was nervous, considering the last time she made a pact, but she did urge Trip on to tell the deal that she had in mind. Trip said that in exchange for Anemia's health, she would take her firstborn child. At first, Anemia was horrified, but then she came up with a clever plan. If she was to expect Asmodeus' child in a few months' time anyway, then she could simply give it to Trip and be free to live the life she desired. There was one part selfishness to give away her child, but there was another part telling her it would likely be for their own safety. She feared Asmodeus and what he may do to the child. She found herself indescribably able to trust Trip. Before she made the deal, she decided to be realistic and level to Trip about the circumstances of her future firstborn child. Despite the warnings, Trip still agreed, and in fact she seemed even more eager to take on the deal. Trip expressed a desire to protect this future child from the demon. Relieved, Anemia returned home. A few more months passed, and she had her son in secret, who looked eerily similar to his demonic father. Sync had no idea about his wife's son, and would remain that way until his own death. Anemia smuggled him out into the forest to Trip, who took the little half-demon shape and did exactly as promised for Anemia, using her magic and some faraway, ancient forgotten rituals. She managed to heal the queen of her ailments permanently. She swore to protect the child from the demon that Anemia spoke of. With a heartfelt goodbye to her friend, Anemia returned to the castle to continue living a long and happy life with her husband, King Sync. Anemia had nearly forgotten about the pacts she had made. but she had occasionally longed to go out to the forest and meet her half-demon son. But she decided against it, simply that it may reopen old wounds and make things more complicated. Soon enough, she and Sync have their own child, a daughter named Wiccan. Wiccan soon transformed themselves from female to male with the process of extensive ritualistic magic. Anemia was horrified for her son. Not for the transformation, which she was actually very supportive of, but for the fact that he had used the old forgotten magics. Despite this, she still gives her son the old cape she used to wear when affiliated with the sages, as a sign of love and affection. Anemia's anxiety grew over time. She knew something horribly wrong was going to happen, but she couldn't pinpoint exactly what. Her fears came true when Sync was murdered by a blue octagon. In fear, and knowing that she was likely next, she decided to go back home to the Sage Sanctuary. When she saw that octagon who called himself Pilot, Anemia sensed something dark, something achingly familiar, but she couldn't figure out what it was. She had never met this shape in her life, but she was apprehensive. There was something dark in him, and whatever it was, she needed to get away. So, remember to like this video if you enjoyed it, and to subscribe if you're interested in seeing more content like this in the future, or if you're just interested in knowing when another level or cutscene for Heartstrings comes out. Have a nice day, everyone.